Greetings, you happily miserable accursed. It's Herle here with the people that never fail to put the cuss in discuss. Your ever-loving political panel, Jordan Leichnitz, Kory Teneycke, Scott Reid. What do we got today? Well, it's Bonnie Crombie promises to resign day +1, and we've got a packed agenda. So let's get at it. That's our first topic. Ontario Liberals are effectively in their post-Crombie era. We'll talk about 57% support, a caucus revolt, and where the party goes from here. Our cursed clipping is from Justin Ling's very fine Substack, Bug-Eyed and Shameless. He's written an excellent long-form analysis. Who was Charlie Kirk anyway? We'll dive into that, and Scott has some special thoughts there. And then Prime Minister Carney unveiled his first 5 national projects. We'll talk about whether that meets expectations and is going to be a building block to political success. Finally, the beautiful Mr. Pinsent calls for our hey yous. So, Kory, you almost bought a bar in Saskatchewan last night?
Well, I wanted to buy a metal Pilsner poster. I don't know, maybe from the '60s, that was on the wall of the Allen Bar.
Yeah.
And they said that the only way it was leaving is if I bought the entire bar. So I was probably not in the best condition to be making those
He
negotiations.
saw you coming.
Well, she
Exactly.
actually, but anyway, the Allen Bar, if you're ever rolling through southeastern Saskatchewan, be sure to stop in. It's a charming place, good pool table, great folks. Was fun. But the more fun part was just spending a couple days hanging out with my family, which always makes me extremely happy.
Yeah, you're home. You've been back to the source. You're replenished and rejuvenated.
Well, I'm clearly back in Toronto now for those watching, but no, I spent the weekend hanging out with my folks and my sister and just catching up. It was nice.
Right. Jordan, do you have some grooming tips for us today?
I was saying beforehand, don't sleep on those overnight curls, friends. The kids on TikTok, they know what's going on. So there you go.
People thought that you had used some extra time getting yourself ready today, but you said no.
There is no such thing as extra time. I have 2 small kids. We are all just trying not to die constantly. So nope, you got to do it while you sleep, friends.
I think it's a question that should be put to you, Herle.
Well, Scott, really, actually, it's I run this show, and I was going to come to you now and say to you, you either can talk about hair or bars. Just take your pick.
Well, I'm only expert in one of those topics. I've had the same haircut since I was 7 months old, and
I mean that could link with your success or lack of success at bars. I just want to put that out there.
My only success in bars is draining the fridge. But is that Dylan or is that Jeff Lynne? Oh, it is Dylan. That's Dylan from the Saved era.
That's my favorite Dylan era. That mid-'70s era. That's my favorite Dylan era.
Oh, that's Hard Rain era. Oh, I thought it was early '80s. I thought it was the Saved going into Gospel Bob zone.
And that's just by the way, on musical notes, so I'm wearing Bob today, but on musical notes, I've got what I think is the best Supertramp album up behind me over my shoulder there. Crisis, What Crisis. And, we didn't talk about it last week because Ken and all that kind of shit, but Rick Davies died from Supertramp. And Supertramp were a big band for me in the 1970s. Very, very big band for me.
Great band. Crisis, What Crisis is also the Bonnie Crombie campaign slogan. Sadly to say.
Not anymore.
Very smooth segue.
Did you ever think you'd be hearing about, talking about, fretting about sovereignty, at least in a political context, when the calendar clicked to 2025? Me neither. However, anyone who follows these podcasts knows I think we're now living in an emerging new world order, with new threats out there, and more optimistically, new opportunities. Continuing on the theme, our presenting sponsor, TELUS, together with OpenText, have just announced a strategic partnership aimed at delivering sovereign AI-powered solutions tailored for government and business. Or, said a little bit more proudly, given the context, this collaboration is going to integrate Canadian infrastructure, advanced AI innovation, and advisory services to provide a unique, sovereign solution for the Canadian market. It's a partnership that underlines with a giant felt marker. The irony of that old school analogy does not escape me. The importance of data sovereignty, ensuring our data remains within our borders, crucial for government and business sectors concerned with privacy and security. I'm the furthest thing from a tech expert, but they say it's the combination of TELUS's robust infrastructure and OpenText's cloud capabilities that result in these kind of advanced, agile, and scalable solutions. Drilling down on some of the benefits, it means streamlined operational efficiencies and decision-making processes, improved service delivery, and a new standard in digital transformation for both government and business sectors. So huzzahs for TELUS and OpenText for the step forward. And as always, friends, huzzahs for Canadian sovereignty. Maybe we should get into it. Maybe we should get into it. So they had the leadership vote yesterday. First of all, you know what's damn curious is she did not speak before the vote. So when you registered, you were handed the ballot. Like, let's be clear what this meeting's about, right? You were handed the ballot when you registered, and you voted immediately. And only when voting closed was she allowed to address the convention. Now, I don't know who's running this thing, but she was the leader. She had the right to address the convention before the vote. So I don't know why she was speaking on Friday night. So she got 57%, which is more than the 51 the Constitution requires. But less than the 66% Joe Clark said one requires. And Joe Clark seems to have trumped all party constitutions with regard to this. And so she failed that test. She initially came out, claimed victory, as I thought was a real possibility you could do if you were kind of shameless about these things now, just bluff your way through them. But she tried to claim victory, and then something happened. I mean, I understand the caucus went sideways on her, but I don't really know what the backstory is. To be honest, folks, I'm not going to pretend to be the ultimate insider on this. But she changed her mind over a couple of hours and said that she is resigning. So, all of us have a lot of experience with leadership reviews. Jordan, why don't you lead us off with everything you saw over that this weekend, and did she really have to go?
Yes, I think very clearly. Yeah, I mean, look, that number is unsurvivable, but of course she was the last one to know that, and I think that tracks with what we've seen from her leadership. But I want to pick up on something you said, David, because there was all sorts of structural things in terms of how that vote went down that were really weird. Her not speaking until after the balloting is really a standout one because normally in a leadership review convention where there's any question about what the outcome is going to be, that leader's speech is an absolutely critical component of trying to sway everybody on the floor to maybe seal the deal if you have a count of who's going to be supporting your leader, to flip people in the room. It's generally seen as an opportunity. So the fact that they presumably chose this arrangement suggests that they were aware that her speech was not going to help her, might even be a detriment, and that they thought they had a better chance if the balloting was done without any exposure, any additional exposure to Bonnie before that. And they did all kinds of other weird things too. Like they had Brian Gallant on speaking before her, and like it's not a good contrast, right? Like she was not good compared to him, and and I think it underscored for people in the room.
Well, he's a really strong performer. Let's be
Well,
clear.
that's right. And certainly people that I heard from who were in the room were, was like, I want that, I don't want that, like whatever this is, right? And so I think, there was clearly an awareness that she herself was a weak link on this, and I think, I was thinking back, of course, it did flash me a little bit back to Edmonton and to Tom Mulcair's leadership loss. And I think, a couple things really struck me coming out of that. One, it is very hard for leaders to recognize when the game is up, right? Like they are often truly the last ones to know. And I think that sometimes that's for very human reasons, because if you've been out for months doing a run to try to secure your leadership, it is very tough to acknowledge when it is not happening. And then the second thing is, I think sometimes, and the structure of this vote would preclude this, but typically, spending time with the delegates, like get out on the floor, go be friendly, talk to people, work the room. Like those kinds of things really can make a really significant difference because a lot of people may have a sense of how they're going to vote coming into that, but are willing and are open to being persuaded differently. They are looking for some sign of hope, something that might sway them because it's true that most delegates, they're not dumb. They know a leadership race is also going to be expensive, divisive, cost the party time at a time when, Ontario is certainly facing a number of crises that's going to take them off track of that. So I think that it's remarkable then that clearly her team did not see fit to structure any of those things so that she could do that. And I think this is, really like now we can pretty much kiss a year goodbye for the Ontario Liberals. Like they are now back into it. And I'm sure we can have lots of discussion about who might potentially replace Crombie. It is, maybe they will find somebody really good, but maybe they're going to find Nader Smith. So there's definitely, I think, a prospect coming out of this that it's not necessarily a marked improvement for them. So I would say, as a New Democrat, I'm pretty happy for Marit. She's got some runway. They've got a convention coming up next weekend, which is now going to look very good by comparison. And so I think that it's up to them to kind of make the most of what is effectively an open field for the next few months.
All right. Kory Teneycke, the man tasked with defeating whoever the Liberal leader is in the next election campaign in Ontario. You just lost your best weapon, right?
Yeah, well, I was, as you heard, in Saskatchewan. Otherwise, I would have been at the convention with a Bonnie t-shirt on, and maybe a cargo truck full of little Mickeys of hard alcohol to hand out. I don't know. Yeah, I'm disappointed that she's leaving. But it is a tough and thankless job being an opposition leader, and it's doubly so, I think, at the provincial level because you struggle a lot more to get attention. And if you're not in the legislature, you're going to struggle even more than that. And I think ultimately that's probably what did her in. Had she won her seat and the party, I think, would have likely been more forgiving for her. It's hard to succeed in that very difficult role unless you're in the House, in the legislature. We saw a bit of that with Poilievre over the summer. Not being around even when the legislature isn't sitting with that legitimacy. I think it dampens the way the media covers you, how much they cover you, how much share of voice you have, and I think her not being able to win her own seat in the general election probably cost her a second time at bat. That said, I'm not sure she was ever going to work in the end, and I feel like I've got a lot of brand equity built up in Bonnie Crombie after having spent many millions of dollars helping to define that.
You should give her at least give her the Hermes scarves you bought for the ads.
Yeah, right. Or maybe the Maserati she was in. It's a tough gig, and I agree with Jordan that I think the advantage coming out of this is probably for Marit Stiles. She is in the legislature. She is, I think, pound for pound, a much more capable political athlete than Crombie ever was. That didn't reflect itself in the polls. I think part of that was a result of the anchor that was Jagmeet Singh, and it's an opportunity, I guess, for the NDP to fill some of that space. The Liberals are going to be distracted with the leadership race. We'll see how divisive that is. If there's a clear winner, it might work out better for them. If it's a really muddled or contentious race, maybe not. I guess we'll see. Field is yet to be laid out for us here.
So whenever there's a meeting in the boardrooms or the rail yards or any of the offices of our sponsor, CN, no matter how high up the chain of command the participants might be, nothing can proceed, and I mean nothing, until there is a discussion of safety. When your business is running some of the heaviest machines ever made along steel tracks, through wilderness and through cities, night and day, in ferocious heat and deep winter, safety and caution has to be sunk into the bones of your operation, as it is at CN. And I don't just mean awareness. The railway spends hundreds of millions on safety technology as well. I say all this because this week is Rail Safety Week. That might not mean a lot to you, but it means a great deal to CN. All week long, the railway will be hosting events along its network of 20,000 route miles, hoping to educate and inform the public on how to stay rail safe. There are 14,000 public rail crossings in Canada. They deserve enormous respect. They are nowhere to play games. Remember, a train moves much faster than it appears, and given its inertia, it takes a long time to stop. Pretty much anything in a train's path loses. A train hitting a car is like a car hitting a toy. Stopped train cars can begin moving abruptly. For heaven's sake, stay away from them. Tunnels, bridges, and trestles and tracks are designed for trains and for trains only. For human beings, they are flashing red danger zones. CN railroaders undergo profound safety training. Their goal is to operate the safest railway in North America, and they are moving toward that relentlessly. But they cannot overcome or compete with recklessness or foolishness. Be aware. Give trains props. Stay healthy. Be safe. I think both of you are spinning on that NDP thing, to be honest. I don't think,
Yeah.
I mean, the progressive primary looks to me like it's already over. I mean, that's why this is such an attractive job for
Yeah.
people because, and I'll just dump it to you, Scott. But I mean, I think, if you want to be the premier of Ontario, this is as likely a route to do it as you'll ever see.
Hey, man, buy low and sell high. That's the rule in investing and in politics. And there's an opportunity to buy really low with the Ontario Liberal Party. And you got a government that's been in office a long time. And sure, Doug Ford's got 59 plus 60% support. And so he's cruising somewhere above 100%. But, you did win 30% of the popular vote. There is an affinity to vote Liberal and for the Liberal brand in the province of Ontario. And if there's one thing Bonnie did, she at least was able to raise a bit of money for the party. She was able to be competitive in that sense when it was really on its back financially. So, I look at this thing and I would say to the party, like, do not do this thing where you like jerk off about, well, let's talk about making certain we like before we get a leader, let's talk about how we put together the proper framework and a program and it. No, right? Go out, take some time, but take some time to recruit outstanding candidates. Give those leaders an opportunity. That's how you rise from the dead as a political party. You get somebody that can do what, frankly, Bonnie wasn't able to do, because with all the handicaps that Kory just mentioned, not being in the legislature, how difficult it is to punch through as an opposition leader, much less leader of the third party. Captain Canada during the Trump and trade wars for Ford, all the challenges of trying to break through, you better have somebody who can bring the wattage, who's got natural charisma and the ability to raise the roof beams, and very importantly, lay the leather on Doug Ford, start to build the case for change. No one, 8 goddamn years we've had it now, no one has started to try to build a persistent case for change that Doug Ford should have to lose
She
a
didn't have
moment's
it,
sleep
though.
over. Huh?
She didn't have it.
She did not have it. So let me just say this on that. I thought, like, this just reminds us, this result of the cruel and uncompromising test of politics, which is really simple: win. And you either have won or you persuade me that you can win. And I thought something really fascinating happened during this leadership race, this leadership review. And it was that the review itself, it seems to me, weakened her. That because it put squarely in the sights her personal performance And so, whereas during a general election, people would make excuses, it would be protected, there'd be advertising, there'd be other factors, there'd be rallies and policies and other dynamics and right? The review, what you heard consistently from people, and you didn't hear much because engagement in this race was really low. But what you did hear is that as she went from riding to riding and, little gathering, coffee clash to coffee clash, people did not leave saying, all right, man, I'm on board. Like, we've been through leadership reviews. You know how rallying those things can be, and I'm going back in time. But when John Turner was fighting for his job, right, there was passion around him. And you could hear the air escaping the tire in terms of her leadership. And so this thing was so sparsely organized. Engagement was so marginal. Sure, they had 2,000 delegates, but no one had an idea because no one was tightly organized. No one was tracking. No one really knew what the result was going to be, including her and her own team, including the party apparatus. So then as you say, they don't even give her the opportunity in that disorganized situation where you would think you might actually be able to persuade more than typical some people who were there, who are casting the ballots. She doesn't even get an opportunity to play to the audience. And her speech, by the way, was short and safe and unspectacular. So there you go. I mean, now the party, I think, frankly, it has a chance. Who knows? It's a long shot, but it's a long shot in the sense that I think it's less of a long shot that they could beat Ford than it is a long shot that they'll get somebody capable of it. But boy, oh boy, there's a job there waiting. There's an opportunity. If you are living and dying on the idea of becoming premier, this is going to be the best chance it comes along in a long time.
Doug Ford is great at politics. Doug Ford's operation is very sophisticated and professional. Doug Ford's operation is well-funded. If you can't run a competitive campaign against somebody who's been in office for 3 terms, you shouldn't be in politics. I mean, just by definition, that should be a competitive election, just by definition. And while we're on it, not that anybody ever said politics is fair or that she was entitled to fairness. But if you're Bonnie Crombie, you are thinking about the fact that Doug Ford and Kory Teneycke fucking buried you in millions of dollars of negative advertising and then called an early election.
Yeah.
Right? Like she didn't really, in her own mind, I'm sure, she did not get a fair chance at this thing.
Life ain't fair.
The brakes.
Make your own luck in politics.
I do think Scott's onto something about the review process, having heard her. And I think there's maybe a cautionary tale here for the federal conservatives if you want to go to when the next leadership review is going to be in January. My impression of her videos and things that she was putting out during that review process was a lot of, brushing past the core issues and not taking any responsibility for her own performance and her own role in doing that. And while, you don't want to, I guess, underline your own negatives, I do think it has a bit of a cleansing effect in so far as demonstrating that you get it. You get some of the obvious reasons why you lost. And I do think it's important in these leadership processes to articulate that. If you want to have people say, okay, well, at least, there's some self-awareness there. They know what they got wrong. And, to listen to her leadership review campaign, the only problem was they didn't nominate candidates early enough. Well, I agree.
I don't think that's fair. I actually had the opposite impression. I thought that review report was searing. I mean, it was like our ideas were wrong, our strategy sucked, our candidates were non-existent, and kind of parenthetically, our leaders no roar in hell. Like, I thought it was a strange document. You're candor, I guess, but what are you trying to tell people?
Well, you're conflating two different things. I'm talking about her campaign, not the technical review that obviously someone with more detachment wrote. I'm talking about all of the social media advertising that I saw from her campaign and the videos that she was putting out. Like at the end of the day, if some person you never heard of writes a report that is harshly critical and really hits nail squarely on the head, how many people are actually going to see that? Very few. People are looking to the campaigns. And I saw, a somewhat subterranean Nate Erskine Smith attack on her. And I saw her defense, which was, very optimistic, very forgiving in terms of what the issues were.
I think the
If he
bottom
was
line
still
is
housing
like,
minister.
go ahead.
So it
I'll
sounds to
just
me
ask a
like
quick
Kory,
question.
sounds to me like Kory isn't a big fan of the Anna Polyev line. We are the Polyevs and we're back.
Fair enough.
Well, like, look, if you're in a competitive leadership review, you're basically in a change election, and you yourself can provide what that change is, or your members are going to provide it for you. That's really
so the key to Turner winning in 86, just to pick up on your point, Jordan, ancient history for folks, was that all the Trudeau folks came out against him. All the big names, Mark Lalonde, Alan McEachran, Keith Davey, Jim Coots, everybody said get rid of Turner. So the review really became about, do you want to go back to the party being run by the same people who've run it for 20 years and left you out? Or do you want to try some new people running the Liberal Party? And he was in trouble until those people stood up to oppose him. It was their opposition that gave his review campaign life.
A review is a referendum. And if you let the referendum be about you, you're behind the eight ball. Make it about something else. She never said, you know what, I want to do this. And there are forces that are working against me, and so fuck them. Or Nate Erskine Smith, if you're standing in the bushes firing your pellet gun, let's get out into the open, right? She never, like, there was no message. And so, you drift and you drift into 57%. You convince yourself for an hour that it's enough until the world says it's not.
So, 2 points of context. Parliament is resuming this week, and the country is seized with the idea of nation-building projects. As I said last week on behalf of our sponsor, the Canadian Climate Institute, this is a critical time for governments to act on climate change, the fuel for extreme weather disasters like wildfires and drought, and to accelerate major projects that build a more competitive economy while keeping emissions down. So, what could that look like? From the Climate Institute's perspective, it means prioritizing projects focused on clean electricity, low carbon energy, and critical minerals. Why? For one, the global clean energy transition is accelerating. Countries going all in on affordable clean energy and advanced low carbon technology will be best positioned to compete. Here are just a few examples to consider. The EU, a key trading partner in uncertain times, is undergoing big changes. Renewables are soaring. Solar power produced more electricity than any other source on the continent this June. In 1 year alone, Europe shaved 8% off its carbon emissions and is on track for a 55% cut by 2030. In China, more than twice as much solar was installed in the first half of this year than in the rest of the world combined. Almost half of all new cars sold there last year were electric. That's in the world's largest auto market. Plus, they're expanding their carbon market. India, the world's third largest carbon emitter, is also introducing a national carbon trading system next year. Those are important markets for Canada, especially as we look beyond the United States. These countries are looking for ways to reduce their emissions. Projects that are low carbon have an advantage there. The same goes for critical minerals, the building blocks of clean technologies like wind, solar, and EVs. All that is more reason for any nation-building project to be focused on the energy transition and reducing emissions here at home. We'll talk next week about Canada's own emissions and where things stand. More to come. All right, let's talk a little Charlie Kirk. I don't know what I think about this. Scott will lead us off because he's got some thoughts on it. I found this, what I thought was quite a compelling primer on the importance of this issue from Justin Ling in his Substack, Bug-Eyed and Shameless. And here's a segment of it that I'll read to you. I'm not sure you can overstate how much Kirk influenced our current moment. He was uniquely responsible for nationalizing the culture war battles percolating on campus, setting up the widespread belief that leftism in all its forms, progressivism, wokeism, liberalism, was a threat to the liberty of every American. In Kirk's world, any and everything is a function of partisan and ideological belief, which meant that any and everything was part of the culture war. You can clearly see Kirk's influence in the waves of book bans in schools across America, in the Trump administration's assault on post-secondary institutions, in the reactionary anti-transgender panic, in MAGA's terminally online ethos, and in the far right's attempts to insert themselves into the machinery of power. The fact that even his assassination itself became a culture war flashpoint should be no surprise. There has been a deluge of hagiography about who he was, pithy tweets about how he was asking for it, morally hollow grandstanding insisting that he doesn't deserve empathy, finger pointing to those who apparently encouraged or celebrated his murder, and total guesswork about what Kirk's fans will do in response to his death. It is, as Bo Burnham sardonically saying, the backlash to the thing that's just begun. The high-velocity rage machine began firing at a rate that we've probably truly never seen before. Okay. There you go. That's my little thing on Charlie Kirk. Scott, I don't know if that's what you wanted to talk about, but
I think I have a slightly different take. Because although it's very potent and beautifully written and thoughtfully written, I think it reflects something that I want to argue the opposite side of, which is that what he did, and in particular how he did it, was so extraordinary and exceptional. And even his critics, to some degree, perhaps mostly his critics, in particular his critics in these last few days since his assassination, since his death, have talked about that. But like, first, that's the second thing I want to say. The first thing I want to say about Kirk is a little bit about political violence. And I don't want to sermonize and join the chorus of people that are correctly saying, my God, we have to think about where we're at on this issue. But of course we do. And of course, violent political rhetoric, which then gets actioned, and the manosphere, which is so comfortable in translating violent rhetoric and the metaphors of war and hunting into our politics, and then we see people take action on that. All of that is terrible. But in particular, what I want to say is this, and we were talking about this off mic. I've had to talk about this with my kids the last couple of days, and I had to talk about this when they shot at Trump. I had to talk about it with my kids. And so to my mind, the most important point about the political violence is I hear people from my political world, like the world that I occupy, who cannot believe Trump, who cannot believe that Trump exists, that he's preposterous and imponderable and grotesque in his very existence. I hear people say all the time, especially sitting around and having a beer with people, I wish somebody would just shoot that fucker, or I wish somebody had finished the job. And I argue with my kids all the time, and I'm not trying to high-hand it, but I say to them, honestly, this is what the argument I make to my 12-year-old, which is, you know what, I don't believe in destiny, I don't believe in God, but I do believe that nothing good comes from something bad. Like the beating of the butterfly's wings is not going to work right if your hope is that these guys take a bullet. And that video, I think, at least for me, is a reminder of why that is true. Because when you look at that thing and you see him sitting there, well, you see what like political violence is. Like you see him slump, you see blood pour out of him like sap in spring, and you think, holy Jesus, that's what you mean when you say someone should shoot. Like everyone's tough on a bar stool. Somebody ought to shoot that son of a bitch. Somebody ought to shoot her, Well, that's what it is. And it's pretty frightening and unpleasant up front, close. The other thing I wanted to say, though, about Kirk is everyone, and again, I'm not going to go into he was a hate merchant. He was, and he certainly didn't have it coming because nobody has that coming. I don't even want to go there. I want to go to this point about how people, whether they're granting him the Congressional Medal of Freedom or whether as opponents, they are sounding the alarm about what he achieved. I'm sorry, guys. But this idea of taking people and rallying them with their rhetoric, doing these sort of polemics on campuses and beating up on a TA or a second-year university student who's holding shaking foolscap paper as he tries to take them on about, being pro-choice. This stuff, it's not extraordinary. This is a party trick. This is a party trick. And if you can summon words, the secret is this: conviction. You speak compellingly, right? If you tell your audience, you're willing to tell your audience, right? Hey, you're right. And especially if you say that with conviction and you're convincing and you're telling them that their prejudices are justified and their biases are well-founded, people will nod their head. And if you follow that up by telling people that they have been wronged and that the things that are not working in their life are forces that conspire, perhaps invisible, perhaps inviolable, but you will get those people to agree. But none of that is extraordinary. Salesmen know this party trick. This is just speaking with conviction, often with pace, putting your words together quickly and forcefully, taking snippets of it, putting on YouTube, harnessing it. Everyone on this panel uses words every day in their daily life with power and impression. And this does not make him exceptional. This does not make him extraordinary. This is a party favor. And I want to make that point because people talk about this guy like he now is being elevated by both his opponents and his supporters to the ranks of Martin Luther King. And he wasn't. He's just a guy who spoke with conviction, really quickly, really convincingly, with conviction. And I know 100 people, because of what I do for a living, who can do the same fucking thing. It's just not that exceptional.
There's a rhythm to this time of year. Parliament sits, schools open, calendars fill, and inboxes, well, those start filling up too. Some of it's junk, some of it's scams, and some of it is sophisticated enough to fool just about anyone. Scammers have not slowed down. The tactics are sharper and more convincing than ever. Phishing texts, fake job offers, investment fraud that looks like the real deal. That's why Canada's banks are taking scam prevention seriously. They're working with law enforcement. They're among more than 50 organizations across the public and private sectors to protect Canadians from scams. And banks offer free, easy-to-understand resources to help Canadians recognize the warning signs. Banks know how hard people work to build savings or grow a business, and how quickly that can be taken away by one convincing scam. Whether you're protecting your parents, your kids, or yourself, education is the first line of defense. For the essential information on how to spot scams and stay safe online, visit cba.ca/scams. Words aren't violence, right? Violence is violence.
Yep.
Is there anything about this notion that ideas are dangerous and to be repressed now that leads to something like what happened? I don't know whether we should be stumbling around looking for root causes in something like this, but I am sort of struck by how far we've come from. I disagree completely with what you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. Like we're very much in a world now where people who are disseminating ideas we disagree with or think are dangerous are seen as dangerous as people with a weapon, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. Look, we're in a time of incredible polarization that has been supercharged by the fact that most of our discourse and discussion happens online with the distance that comes with that. It's allowed dehumanization to happen as part of those debates. And then I think, you add in the United States, easy access to firearms, and that sets the table for some of these things. Look, I think, it goes, at least in my corner of the world, without saying that I think Charlie Kirk had terrible politics and he did real harm. And the difference, I think, for Charlie Kirk versus somebody who is just, expressing those ideas, of course, he was in a position to enact some of these. And I think that Justin Ling's piece does a good job of showing that Charlie Kirk was not just a debater with, as Scott said, very good, party tricks in terms of his speaking skills. He was an organizer. And he was an organizer who managed to crystallize large groups of young men behind an authoritarian leader in the United States in a way that is a real threat to US democracy. Now, no one should die for their beliefs. And that, I think, has to be abundantly clear from everybody. But what I really have been thinking about with respect to his murder and the implications of what might come next, because that's, I think, of course, the unsaid thing of all of this, beyond the horror of the event and the sense that this is yet another moment of political violence, as we've seen a number over the last couple of years in the United States, is what is it about what he was doing that managed to connect and mobilize with a group of people that the left is utterly failing to connect with? And I think that's actually probably the most important thing for people on my side of the spectrum to be thinking about. And the second thing I think
Because
is,
those men think the left is hostile to them.
sure, I think that's part of it.
Not just not attractive to them,
Mhm.
actively hostile to them.
Yeah. Yeah, and anyway, and they found a home with this rhetoric. Many of them did. And I think that figuring out a way to make the left more welcoming to a broad group of those voters is important. But the other thing I want to say about this, and you've heard a number of politicians say this in Canada and in the US, the more we see these acts of political violence and the more that rhetoric of political violence against opponents becomes normalized, frankly, the more dangerous it is for elected people to do their jobs across the board. And the more they are going to be cut off from the public, and not just in the United States, here in Canada as well. I'm sure you all know lots of elected people who've already changed their behavior, who've changed how accessible they are to their constituents, or who have decided simply not to run again because of these types of threats. So I think I find that this corrosive really across the board. And I do worry a lot about where it's going, not just in the US, but also here.
I mean, it's not a new thing though, right? It's an enduring part of their political culture. I mean, if you think about the 1960s, right? Not only did you have JFK, but you had RFK, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. There's a lot of shooting going on. So it's, as you said, combined guns and high periods of very, very high tension. The overload system goes to violence. Kory, you got anything you want to say about this?
Well, not a lot. I think you just made the point that I would have made, David. There's uh, a temptation to conflate what goes on in U.S. politics with what's happening in Canada, and frankly, it's not the same. It wasn't the same in the '60s. Not the same now. You know, to find a federal politician in Canada who was assassinated, you got to go back to Darcy McGee. And for most people in Ottawa, Darcy McGee's place where you go to get a beer at the corner of Sparks and Elgin. It's not a person that's that far back in time. I guess what Mark Lalonde would be the other example, but provincial, victim of FLQ terrorism.
Pierre Laporte.
Pierre Laporte.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I don't. Sorry about that. Anyway, it's not. These are not names that are going to be rolling off the tip of anyone's tongue, is my point, because political assassination is not a part of our culture. Sadly, it is a long-standing part of U.S. political culture. And the outcome of assassinating somebody, for those who think that that's a good idea, and there are people out there who do think about that or talk shit like Scott suggested about things like that, is generally the opposite of what you intend. Like if you look at the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, it led to the harsh reconstruction of the South, which still echoes politically today. Like life in the South would have been much better if Lincoln had lived. I think by any assessment. So there's, it can create a backlash that will be a tsunami that's going to swamp you if you think that that's going to advance your cause. I think I'd recommend if somebody wants to read, what I think the larger political point, if there is one around any of this, it's probably about young men and where they're at in the world. Read Michael Spitali's very thoughtful piece at the Air Quotes Media website around this, why young men aren't voting for progressive parties these days. And there's a lot to think about there. But, campuses have become a very hostile place for a lot of young men, particularly young white men. And and that's not to say that diversity isn't important and that we shouldn't have, everybody feeling accommodated. But if that accommodation is met by the demonization of a group that have constructed as being all powerful, expect there to be a reaction to that, which is very negative politically. And I think, all of these things are kind of growing out. The fertile soil in which Kirk was going around campuses, planting his garden in, was an intolerance of free speech, a demonization of people who have traditionally held more power in the world, and there's a reaction to that. There are a lot of people who didn't like that message that was overwhelmingly the predominant message on campuses, and they swung around to his point of view as a result of that. I think that's it's more than a parlor trick. It's a parlor trick combined with a market that's ready to hear that message.
Hurley Burleyites, let's talk about something you use every day, but probably don't stop to think about too often. Payments. Tapping your debit card at the coffee shop, picking up groceries, buying movie tickets, e-transferring money to your kid at university. All of it runs on digital payment infrastructure. And in Canada, that infrastructure isn't imported. It's built here. It's ours. I'm talking about services like Interact Debit and Interact e-Transfer. You might think of them as easy, reliable, secure ways to move money, and they are. But they're also Canadian-made systems woven into our daily lives. Our newest sponsor, Interact, was founded in 1984 with a simple goal: connect Canadians to their money. 4 decades later, that mission is still alive and well, with Interact moving billions of transactions a year and innovating new ways for Canadians to pay. And here's where it gets real. As foreign platforms reach deeper into our digital and financial lives, sovereignty means more than resources and borders. It's about who owns the technology your money runs on. When you tap your debit card or send an Interact e-transfer, you're using infrastructure built and operated right here by Canadians for Canadians. That matters for competition. It matters for consumer choice. It matters for our economic security. With Interact, that's another Canadian-made innovation you can be proud of every time you pay. All I know is that the University of Regina, the Marxists in the political science and other social studies departments said they could live with conservatives, but when the revolution came, I would be the first to go.
Facts. Facts, David.
Yeah, I'm not sure you'd get that answer on a lot of campuses today. Like when
Yeah.
you do surveys of who actually is inhabiting the arts department at any given university, you're more likely to find a unicorn than you are to find a conservative. It's like there's so few of them.
I don't know,
I can
man.
probably name
this
them
is
all.
the fucking thing when people tell themselves like, let's
I don't
not
say-
let's
that's-
not assert these as facts.
Well,
This is a script.
yeah, I think there's been a lot of surveys of the opinions and perspective of university professors. You try to go and find me in the real world, Marxist-Leninist, Scott. You're going to have to search high and low. It'll take me about 90 seconds in the faculty lounge.
At the University of Regina, when I went, I'm telling you, there was a professor in the political science department who was NDP, and he was the right winger in the department.
Right.
Right.
That also checks out.
Those
By the way, a shout out to
those are
the
the
great
good
Dan
old days.
DeVlieger.
There you go.
There you go.
Those were the good old days.
I don't know. I'm an adjunct prophet, Queens, and I don't wander around the halls looking at a bunch of people who are trying to restart society or bury capitalism. I think this is
Well,
until people tell themselves.
the contradiction of tearing down statues of Sir John A. and talking about how words are violence, while allowing Jewish students to be actually assaulted on your campus, is a contradiction that I think the university sector needs to get its head around.
Yeah, those are not the same thing.
They're not the same thing. One's actual violence, and the other one is bullshit, right? And histrionics.
All right, you know what? We're getting uncomfortably, it's just getting uncomfortable for me. We have to move on. We're going to talk about major projects. The Carney government unveiled the first of the national projects, first five of the national projects last week. Got some criticism from people who said, well, these projects look like they've been actually in the works for some time. These aren't brand new things. I was more interested in where criticism did not come from, which was Danielle Smith, because there was no pipeline on the list, and no pipeline on the suggested next list of five items. And so it was kind of a different list of things than we had been expecting. The second five that they're teasing out look maybe more interesting than the first five. But anyway, Kory, you sort of have a stake in this. What do you think?
I give it 1 star. Like I don't think it was a good list. I do think it was, and at times, recycled projects. So, for instance, the SMR project in Darlington, underway. It's under construction right now. You can go out there and view the site. Like, this is not a new thing, and it's not something in which there is particularly a government impediment. Like, it's approved, it's under construction, it's underway.
Right.
So what the fuck is it doing on that list? Now, if you want to talk about large scale nuclear build out, yeah, that would be something that would be real. But the SMR program, which is basically a demonstration plant, it's not something that's going to bend the curve of the Canadian economy here. It is mind-boggling. But the answer around that was, well, it's got to be things that are very shovel ready. Okay, then what the fuck is a high frequency rail train between Quebec City and Windsor going to do? Like that, I'll be dead 100 years before that thing's built, and nobody
I
wants
think I heard somebody from the government
wants it.
speculate that they might start that in 4 years.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah, but who wants it? Like, look, how many people, you've traveled as much as I do, David. How many people are traveling on a daily basis between Montreal and Toronto who aren't in their own car? It's probably a couple thousand, right? Like, add up the number of flights between the two locations and one via train, and you got the number. But it's a few thousand at the absolute fucking peak. Do you know how many people were moving a day on the go trains here in the GTA? It's like between 300 and 400,000 people a day. What is it that we need to do if you want to bring housing prices down, if you want to have us not stuck in gridlock all the time? It's more go trains. It's things like a freight bypass, so you're not having to move all of the freight through downtown fucking Toronto, and instead you can put commuter trains there. There are real things that provinces have put forward that are actually important to the mission that Carney has laid out.
So,
And
but
I
just
think
stop for a second. Just stop for a second, Kory, and let's give our listeners something really interesting to hear here, which is Ford and Carney are attached at the fucking hip, and
Not for long.
They watch movies together, and they have sleepovers together, and they all that shit. Like, how did this get wrong?
Well, I think I guess I got to theorize. You inherited largely a caucus, a cabinet, and a staff that are Trudeau folks and are used to a very different environment. And I think Carney brings a much different perspective to all of that. But how in control of his own government he is in terms of anything past him proclaiming it is up for a lot of debate. But I got to say this, it shouldn't be a surprise that Ontario has no fucking time for that list of bullshit that they put out. It's not because they haven't been told many times. So, look, Ford likes to get along with people, likes to make things work, and I'm sure he'll continue to try to make this work. But the trajectory that they're on right now is not one of political friendship. I'll tell you that much.
Scott, this might be the most interesting part of this dynamic is how two people that are working so closely together could end up at odds on a list like this. Like, why wouldn't the feds just make sure that the list worked?
Or create context and precondition privately and publicly. I'm not as wound up about it. I mean, I as Kory, in the sense that I don't have skin in the game. I'm not advising one premier and working for that. I'm not judging these on their technical merits. I assume there's going to be other lists. I assume, at the look of it, if the criticism is many of these things are advanced, then I assume that the criterion for their selection was overwhelmingly focused on, are they something that is readily unlocked and they're down the track. Well, they could have talked about that. They could have said not just that there's more lists coming, but that, what you're going to see in this initial wave is going to be of this characteristic for these reasons, and people that could then criticize it. So there's a little bit of preconditioning, but we're especially you and I, David, but others too, we're a little tough on the government in the last couple pods about their communications rollout and stuff. I at least look at it and I say, well, there's evidence of a strategy, right? They are trying to shape the national conversation going into the resumption of Parliament. So you had major projects, right? Then you had on Sunday, holding it on a Sunday so that you filled the news hole for Monday morning when the House resumes. You've got Build Canada Homes Monday morning. We've already had we had Steve McKinnon out talking about legislation in the House and moving that along. So they are attempting to drive and dominate the discussion and shape that. I still think the interesting thing to watch is there's such a contrast in almost role of government philosophy between the two leaders, right? Like, so again, you hear major projects office, process, Build Canada Homes. This is this mandate. These are the structures. This is the person who's going to run it. Great person, by the way, Anna Baylor. Glad to see her there. But you look at all that and, like, it's very, like, it betrays that kind of management consultant impulse toward process. And we all know that the truest thing in politics is people want to know what you're doing a lot more than they want to know how you're doing it. And right now there's been a lot what they're communicating. I like to see the rapidity of it. I like to see the dominating of the headlines and driving the conversation. But a lot of it is about how. And what the institutions and structures and organizations will be. And I think they've got to move to what we're doing, and here's evidence of it pretty soon, or they're going to have issues like carjackings and home invasions really running up their ass.
Well, who do you think
Danielle Smith's head explode?
Why didn't Daniel Smith's head explode? Yeah, I mean, to me, this is a really maybe more interesting than the Ontario dynamic. I mean, look, Kearney clearly sees himself and is professionally a deal maker to some degree. And I think that's how he views his role. He's trying to set up some sort of a grand bargain with Alberta, and that's why we're seeing signals that he's going to be backing off the emissions cap, why the targets are going to change. And I think that the quid pro quo there is obviously to get the approval of some sort of carbon and capture program so that potentially you could maybe, if not create the pipeline yourself, create the business conditions where a pipeline is more possible. And I think in Kearney's mind, that is a straightforward proposition to make a deal with Alberta. But I think there's one big problem with that, and that's politics. And there's just no good politics for Danielle Smith to have an end game with the federal government on this. Just ask Justin Trudeau. The man purchased a pipeline in order to try to secure a similar grand bargain. And it was to his detriment in the end. He got no credit for it. and in fact endured a lot of pain in the rest of Canada for that move. So I will be fascinated to see how this unspools, because I think that at the end of the day, the Prime Minister and Premier Smith are operating at fundamentally different levels. She will always move the goalposts on the federal government. That is inherent in what is in her political benefit to do. There is no drive on her end to actually reach an end game with this federal government. She needs them as a foil. Whereas for Carney, his problem is different and far more immediate. He has to somehow connect this major projects push, which is, to be clear, at the moment, his largest economic plank in terms of how he is going to deal with the absolute economic shitstorm that we are just now headed into because of the tariff war. And his challenge is he has to now draw a connection between this major projects push, where all of the jobs, all of the trade benefits, all of the economic benefits are many years off, even in the case of the projects that they put on this first list, and what Canadians are feeling right now. That is a far finer needle to thread for him. And I think it will be interesting to see how long Danielle Smith goes along with this before the laws of gravity on this file reassert themselves. I'm not betting long.
There's a fundamental contradiction, and that list and what Carney said he was going to do during the campaign and promised to do with this initiative. If it's about, we need to diversify our trade and we need to start doing things for ourselves, grease the skids on creating more jobs and prosperity in our economy, it first of all has to be new things. You can't just recycle a bunch of things that are already underway. That is not a credible answer to the question that you've laid out and the promise that you've made. And it's also not good if it's things that are probably never going to happen, like the high-frequency rail train, which is probably the only thing that's been talked about more than recognition of credentials between provinces over the last 50 years. So it's not a credible fucking promise to begin with, and nobody is asking for it. So, explain the politics of that to me. If you have laid out this case that you are going to do these big projects to get the economy moving, and then you give a recycled, warmed over list of shit that's already going on, and a warmed over list of things that are probably never going to happen, that nobody outside of and maybe the Department of Transportation in Ottawa has any interest in fucking doing. It's not great. It's not great. And, that's to prove me wrong.
I mean, for what it's worth, I still bet we're going to see high-speed rail before we see a tunnel under the 401. So there's that.
Maybe not high-speed rail, because nobody's actually talking about high-speed rail.
It's high-frequency rail.
High frequency. Sorry. It's fast. Yeah. It's fast, but it's not high speed. It's just frequent.
But
I thought that had something to do with radio waves, high frequency. I thought it just meant like our food would get warm faster. Is there, I don't even know where I'm going with this. This has nothing to do with political strategy. It doesn't have anything to do with political communication. But is there something like when you hear Carney talk about this major projects enterprise, it's almost like he took people at their word months ago when tons of people in business and tons of people in the provinces said, you know what? We don't even need the federal government to write a check. We just need the fucking government to get out of the way. We need them to eliminate the regulatory process, get rid of the red tape, just green light it, show that you're willing. And so
they're not doing that. They're not doing that though, Scott.
Well, but they haven't done it. Sort of building around every single one of these other things that you're talking about and other people are talking about don't come with just a request that the federal government simply relax the regulatory review, but they come with, and we're going to need $2 to $10 billion in federal cash on the barrelhead.
Well, except that high-speed rail, man. High-speed rail is like a $30-40 billion
high frequency, David.
High frequency, that's right. Whatever you're gonna
fucking high cost. And like isn't that true of all these other things? Like everyone, like
not necessarily.
Who was the private sector proponent for a pipeline? That's the big challenge, right? I suspect
who's a private sector proponent for high frequency rail?
Well, this is
Well,
what I'm saying, right?
Bombardier,
So
probably. I don't know.
This
Like,
is great.
but it's
I'm gonna
somebody in
love watching
Montreal.
everyone make the case for massive public spending on these while we're cutting everywhere else. So
No, exactly.
But to Scott's point, right? Like there are a lot of things that don't require federal government money, like mine approvals, for instance. Like there, we're sitting on a vast sum of resources, and the Ring of Fire. There are many other projects all across the country that would meet that test. The federal government infringed on provincial jurisdiction in a massive way by bringing in impact assessments, like another layer of approvals that is required to have these projects go ahead. They were largely slapped down by the Supreme Court. And yet that function still persists. Carney campaigned on one approval, not layers of approvals. And if the province is going to do an environmental assessment, then that is sufficient. You don't layer on another federal process. That was his commitment to do. Why the fuck are they still doing it then?
All right. You know what? That may my my last comment on this. My last comment on this is about comms because regardless of what the content of these lists are, Kory, and I did spend a lot of time bitching about how Trudeau didn't talk about Canada in any traditional way. I do love the fact that Carney said the next tranche of the list would be out by the Grey Cup.
Yes.
people were like, is that Canada Day? I got into a vicious argument the other day about the Toronto Argos and Rogers trying to recruit an NFL team to Toronto. Anyway.
Yeah, I know. Rogers is going to try to kill the Argos, so I'm going to have to try to kill Rogers, but that's a different matter. So let's go to our Hey Yous.
Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats. The Hey Yous are about to begin.
Scott, go ahead.
I'm going to go back to our original topic. My Hey You is to the Ontario Liberal Party. I'm begging you. Don't panic. Pick wisely. Right? Everyone's going to go, oh my God, we didn't have a leader in the House. We're Noversville. We got to go fast. There'll be people who think they're in the catbird seat for the next leadership. So they'll want to push for a quick process and they'll say, we can't afford to waste time. We got to get working and raising money. There is one path out of this. And I hate to say it because it sounds like a magic trick, but the one path out of it is someone who really lights the lamp. It's someone that's interesting and exciting. And you need to find that person. You need to give potential candidates who might fill out that suit the opportunity to come forward. So don't do this thing where you're like, we're going to lead a big review and policy exercise, and then but we want to pick the leader quickly. No, you got to get this right. We're going on a decade now.
Scott, the one thing you're going to hear that I think is wrong is we got to have a big policy convention and figure out what we're about before we choose our leader.
It drives me nuts. Pick the right person, then they'll fucking tell you what you're about. And you know what you're about? You're about not losing over and over and over again. Okay? Like that. It's that this is a competition.
ladies and gentlemen, the Liberal Party of Ontario.
All right, Jordan, got to Hey You.
Yeah, I'm going to continue being cranky to Premier Ford. So he said a really dumb thing this week, and I think it got a bit of ink, but it was really stupid, so it deserves more. So this was, he was out at the Toronto Board of Trade, and he made the comment that unemployed young people should just look harder for jobs, which is pretty rich because I'm not sure how hard he had to look for a summer job when he was younger. But in addition to bringing a really dated, get off my lawn energy that is unusual, actually, for Ford, this is one of, I think, his worst moments when you see him punching down, which he does from time to time. This was one of them. I don't know if he's aware, but this summer, and this actually does touch back to something that we've discussed in this podcast. Do you know what the unemployment rate was for male teens in Ontario? Any guesses, anyone? It was 25%. 25%. This is a structural issue. This is not people not looking hard enough. And I know that Ford and the smart people around him love a good stunt. And so I would like to gently offer the suggestion that next time he is in a room full of employers, as he was at the Toronto Board of Trade when he made these boneheaded remarks, instead of crapping on people who are victims of a historically poor economic circumstance, of which, it should be pointed out, Ontario is the leader in how badly things are going, maybe he could talk to that room full of employers about how great it is to hire young people. And that is my hey you for this week.
Yeah. Kory?
Boy, it's going to be all Ontario today, I guess. We're going to be leaning on you, David, to make it national somehow. No, I was going to do a hey you to the leadership aspirants of the Ontario Liberal Party. I want to say, hey, I'm building a beautiful multi-million-dollar advertising getting to know you campaign for whoever wins. So good luck, Nate Erskine Smith and Nav Baines and whoever else it is. I'm looking forward to introducing you to the people of Ontario. You might not like the way it's done, but it's okay. It'll work.
Oh, don't get over your skis, my friend.
Oh, well, they'll have the money. They'll have Nick in there working away at it. It'll be yeah. Liberals have to be aware.
Herle, and then there's no dirt to be found. There's no argument against the man that could possibly be made.
God help us if David runs. That's true.
Oh my God. You were talking about that it factor, Scott.
That's the thing. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Come
that
on.
kind of breakthrough thing.
Share the charisma, Herle. It's not fair of you to hog it all yourself. Spread it across Ontario, you son of a gun.
If I ever find any, I'll share it. My hey you is Ontario along with everybody else. My hey you is to talented people who want to be premier. Think about this gig. Think seriously about this gig. The leadership of the Ontario Liberal Party. Doug Ford will be going for a fourth mandate in the next election. Generally not done. The tectonic plates of politics should be with you. We're going into a tough economic period. Lots of uncertainty, probably a recession. This is going to be a real prospect to win. The Liberals have established themselves as the alternative to the Conservatives. If the Conservatives were to lose, pretty evident they would lose to the Liberals at this point. So if you want to be the Premier of Ontario, this is as good a shot at it as will ever be presented to you. So take it. Come on. All right. That's our show for today. Thank you three for being here. Thank you to our sponsors who allow us to produce this free podcast, everybody. And thank all of you accursed who watched or listened. And we'll be back next week. We're not ditching you anyway. I know I heard a lot of crap this weekend about our 2 weeks off. We're not taking any time off for a while. We'll be around. You can count on us. We'll see you next week.